Yes. Okay. Hi, Timur and Jack. Welcome to Venture with Grace today.
Hey, thanks, Grace. Yeah, you
It's great to be here.
Yeah.
Awesome. Want to quick give the audience a shout out. Hi, Sean. Great seeing you here. Sean joined right before we even started the show. So, okay, let's start with, both of you guys' background. So Timur is a head of AI ML of AWS in the startup space, and Jack is the chief
Data
officer. I'm so sorry. Oh my God.
Yeah, no worries.
All right.
I'm literally in, trauma happened this morning. But anyway, so
Friday.
Friday, crazy. Anyway, so Chief Data Officer of Security AI. Let's start with, what is your day-to-day like, at these businesses, and before we jump into the business side of things.
Sure. Yeah, Jack, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go. So it's a different job for me than what I'm used to having, right? I came up in product development. Most recently, I was a chief data and analytics person at one of the biggest companies in the world, big Fortune 500.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was used to having 3 telephones alongside of me for when the systems go down. Now I'm getting to actually specialize, and I work on GenAI projects and data projects with the executives of our clients. I also do a little bit of strategy and spend a little bit of time working on core technology. So it's kind of a fun day. I get to kind of do what I want now.
Amazing. I was like talking to Jack that he was on everywhere. He was on the MIT Sloan review, and then he was on the Cube, the Amazon reInvent, and it was super fun to watch all these like talks. And why don't we start with maybe Timur? Why don't we talk a little bit more about your background as well?
Yeah, sure thing. By the way, Jack sounds like the startup life suits him well. We're not here in grind. You're getting fun and play. So yeah. And by the way, Grace, I go by Timur, so it's fine. Just Timur. So it's easy.
Oh my God, I am literally today. I'm so sorry, everyone. Literally, like it was really bad.
That's all right.
But anyway, yeah.
No, it's the fun part of having a unique name. Yeah, so I get to run the AI and ML startups business development team for AWS startups. So we're the division of AWS focusing on working with startups overall, but I have the pleasure of working with the highest priority. I've identified the most innovative that are strategic for one of a few reasons. They're building on AWS in a way that we really want to highlight, or they're just seeing great market growth and momentum that we want to support, or they are just very strategic in terms of what they're working on overall, and things like security and obviously growth and generative AI. And I've only been with AWS about 9 months. So I'm actually coming to AWS after 2 generative AI startups. I was at Glean up until early this year. And then prior to that, I was at Neva and was there right when ChatGPT launched. And so still, the last 2.5 years have been transformative for us all. But wanted to have this discussion because what Jack and what Securiti is working on is very near and dear to my heart, both because they are very strategic for AWS, but because we can't do AI without a dialogue around responsible AI and safety. And, I've done a few startups myself. I'm a 4-time co-founder. The latest was around privacy analytics. And then prior to that, I actually did a cybersecurity startup. And so I'm fascinated by what Securiti is doing in terms of pulling an entire dialogue around safe AI into one framework. So that's why we wanted to have you do this interview with us.
Totally. I feel like security is definitely one of the most important things, and especially in the data space. Jack's team recently launched GenCore AI. Why don't we start there? For the audience who may not be familiar with, why don't we start with like, what is GenCore AI, and how can companies leverage that to build a better system and more secure products in the AI space?
Yeah, I'll start on it. So if you look at the data space today, right, you can really divide it into 2 places. You have these analytics lake houses that, Databricks and Snowflake and all that spend. And then you also have transactional systems, where actually the bulk of the work and everything goes on, right? I was
Right.
looking, and that's where all the toil comes, and that's why I carried 3 phones, because transactional systems go down. If you're trying to be, a company managing both sides of that, right, you end up in today's environment, or prior to security, having to cobble together a whole bunch of pieces just to do data security and data privacy and governance. Make sure you have the access rights, make sure you have the right legal rights, and you would put together a whole bunch of tools. And then you have to do Gen AI. Well, now I got to move my data someplace else. To do that, you can move it into Databricks or you can move it into AWS, but then you're moving it and you're losing track. What we've built at Securiti is really a unified view of that. So we understand the security and the privacy of the data in your transactional systems. We understand it as it flows into your analytic systems. And then now we understand it as it can flow into your generative AI systems, whether you're building generative AI or whether you're securing some SaaS. We have all of that capability. GenCore is actually the ability to build pipelines, to build flows for RAG applications, soon to be agentic applications, using secure data, understanding the rights to use that data, putting LLM firewalls in place, but not having to cobble it together. One unified view of it that allows companies, people to trust it. And trust is the most important thing. And so, if you're going to be using Bedrock on AWS, if you're using, all sorts of other systems in AWS, it allows you now to bring all those pieces together and amplify. And whether you're a big company, whether you're a small company, right, you need this in order to actually do it. Otherwise, you're going to be building it by hand. You're going to spend, 2 years building it by hand. We spent at least a year at my last company even getting close to some of this idea. And you're cobbling it together. And wouldn't you rather be building the end application than worry about how to do it? And that's what we're doing.
Great. Yeah. And I think what's interesting for us, of course, we feel very strongly that AWS is a leader in security. And as Jack mentioned, Bedrock is our kind of core. Bedrock and SageMaker and our ties into our security offerings are critical, and we've seen incredible growth there. But we're also not naive enough to think that, we don't have, there's other data platforms, and in terms of a security orchestration or AI security orchestration, I think the value proposition that you're talking about, Jack, just makes it.
Yeah, these things are totally complementary, right? So, the way GenCore works is you can use us for everything, or, in fact, we don't have LLM platform, right? We are the thing that enables the LLM platform. You want to use SageMaker to do portions of it? Fantastic. And in fact, we've built all the connectors and everything to make that happen. So it's really an extension of, or a complementary, as opposed to anything, in opposition.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit? I mean, and Grace, jump in, but I think, people talk about guardrails a bunch, and we feel very strongly about guardrails, being very important from the input and the output. Can you talk a little bit about how you're complementing that, integrating, maybe providing some version of guardrails as well as like a measurement of, I guess, how would you describe that?
Yeah, I think the way that we describe it is context aware, right? So not only do we understand the query side coming in, but we actually understand all the data flowing in as well. So if it's a RAG application or something else, so we can understand it. So if somebody's a financial analyst, they start asking about compensation of somebody else, it'll block it, right? It understands the awareness of what's in that content, because we actually use language models to understand who's in the content, restricted information, PII or company private information, classify that document, say, oh, well, that's a loan application, or that's a medical record. And so we do that on the fly as the data is being prepped and moved through all the various stages. And so then the firewalls that we have really are these, same idea of a guardrail, but just a little bit on steroids because of the context aware of the data itself.
Yeah, that's great. By the way, since we're on a podcast and we can talk a little bit offhand, I don't want to call out any companies in particular, but as we all have backgrounds in SaaS, and then you mentioned RAG. I've seen a couple of companies adopt RAG as a service, and just like when you say it, it just doesn't sound good. And I really want to discourage people using the term RAG ass as a good term for their products. I don't know if you've seen that, but hopefully nobody.
No, I haven't seen that, but no, I agree with you. There's some abbreviations that really should be re-examined early.
Right.
Early. Yeah.
I want to also chime in to talk about, like, data poisoning attacks. So I feel like in security, there's one part of the times that's just like everything moving smoothly, but there's also a lot of attacks that are happening. People may inject data into the open source ecosystem, and it turned out to be gonna be like a really bad outcome for people who are leveraging these like open source projects and everything else. I wonder, what's your thought on the data poisoning kind of like situation?
Yeah. So I went to work at Oracle like 15 years ago, and I'd already been in the business for 15 years. But your first days at Oracle, you have to take a security class that teaches you all the in-depth things about SQL injection, right? Fantastic course, by the way. Everybody should take the Oracle internal SQL injection class, right? But when you really start to think about it, attacks can happen through multiple ways. We've seen, like attacks in infrastructure like solar winds, right? And we've seen attacks like the Move It attack, where somebody's, infiltrated and, taken advantage of different build paths. And sure enough, there are companies that are examining that, the build of the software, the open source software that may be in Hugging Face or someplace else, and scanning all that. But there's even a more fundamental issue, which is there has been this notion in AI for years and years and years, whether you were doing it in graph databases where I came up, or whether you were doing LLMs or something else, that you could insert into the feed data that you're using to train escape characters or escape clauses or some pattern that years later could be triggered. And, there was a movie back in the 60s, and I was alive in the 60s. I'll explain the 60s to people later. But I was too young to see this movie called The Manchurian Candidate. And it was exactly that. And for other people, and I'm sad, Zoolander had the same theme too. I'll explain Zoolander to people too, which is crazy, right? But this notion that you could trigger and pull data out because of character sequences in the training data. And if you think about it, right, it used to be when we first started doing small language models, and we were all, or large language models, using BERT, Roberta, PyTorch, whatever it happened to be, right? We knew what data was going in. Now you're using these foundational models that people are training from all sorts of places. And there are data poisoning attacks. That's what it is. It's possible. It's been demonstrated. And it's something that all of us need to be aware of. Could be out there in that data. Now, I'm not saying vendors are just disregarding that. They're not. But it's something that we as a community need to be aware of. And the old SQL injections.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating time. I think we're very early. I think it's fair to say we're so early in the security threats and what do we have? I mean, coming from a background on that, but it's interesting that you talk about open source models, Grace. And I mean, look, we're proud that our partners on Bedrock, including Anthropic, Mistral, Cohere, virtually everyone have taken a very strong position on security. I think Anthropic in particular has taken the whole, basis of being is security and probably some of the strongest copyright protection out there. And then we do talk about the open source models, which have huge opportunity. I think the open source security community is still forming around these models. I remember the day, by the way, I've seen both of those movies, Jack. They're great.
We'll have to explain it to other people.
Yeah, well,
right?
we need to know the classics. But, I remember building my first startup and on Linux Apache, and .NET was supposed to be more secure and et cetera. There was this whole push against, open source security. And now, it very rapidly emerged that open source was much more robust and almost similar to, I heard a great quote.
Totally the case, right?
Yeah.
But, think about a data scientist, and I've done it myself, right? Oh, I need a library, pip install.
Yeah.
Right? Pip install. And, we know, for example, that there's Python libraries that can, in fact, one came out the other day on Krebs on Security that will look at the color of the scanned credit card and just for that certain card, route the numbers to a third party, right? And so it's that notion that we in the community need to protect against. Obviously, there's things about bias. Obviously, there's other things, but these are computer security issues that we need to be aware of.
Yeah.
And again, it's all about just building us. It's all about engineering this and knowing ahead of time, or at least thinking about these things ahead of time. It's not anything.
One of the things that really blew my mind is the latest, the Sonnet 3.5 V2 release, which has computer use in it. There's a whole dialogue about, okay, so now you can turn over your computer to the model, and there's obviously ability to have that surf and do that. So what happens if you now surf to a site that has some type of prompt injection built into it?
Yeah.
And so that's really interesting. But then I made it think back too. All of that content out there that's been used for training data has that vulnerability, right? So can you talk a little bit about, the training data and just as you see more and more of that, and obviously there's an insatiable demand for training data everywhere. How does that fundamentally come into the dialogue with your clients, and what are you looking at for a data cleansing, data quality, responsible AI type of score?
Yeah. So again, we'll take care of everything about a company's data or a company's license data that they're dealing with. They're going to be combining it with a foundational model, probably that they've licensed, whether it's Anthropic or whatever it happens to be. Or they might be tuning their own model right out of the box. Everything about their data moving in, scanning it, understanding it, identifying, not just PII information, but, potentially encrypted information embedded inside of that data, anything like that. You'll see us eventually extend to dynamic agent fetch data as part of that as well.
Yeah.
We're not there yet, but we'll take care of all of that by using language models themselves to do that, and other techniques, right? We have a graph system underneath, actually based on Neptune, AWS Neptune. Hi, Brad. Hi, Aura, right? And that allows us to put together all this context around the information. So again, if you're building on the fly applications, or if you're going to be training, you need to have that introspection. It's super interesting to see things like scale and everything come up that allow you to annotate and everything, but you actually need to move, even another step, which is that data security as you go. So.
Jack, and sorry, I'm fascinated by this. So I would say that my journey as a founder for a security company was fascinating. Now I was selling a security solution that people really, really, really did not want to talk about. So in 2012 and 2013, I launched a solution for bot detection in advertising. And to say the least, nobody wanted to talk about the problem because nobody wanted to admit that there was a huge amount of bot traffic in advertising and on social media. So one of the reasons I ended up selling the company was I said, selling security for this it's kind of like selling a visit to the dentist. Nobody really wants to go. And if they do go, they really hope you don't find anything. And that was a real challenge for me in our go-to-market. Now, other people did it better. I wasn't the best. How are you finding the appetite, though, to talk about this? To me, it feels very different in that my sense is there's a broad recognition that we have to get this right, that enterprises, this is not just, we have to meet some compliance standard. Okay, it's a cost. To me, this feels very fundamental, but for you, you're in the middle of it. How are you finding the reception in talking about this?
I think the world's a little bit different today than maybe just a few years ago, in that we've seen these attacks happen, right? Boards of directors of major companies are expecting this. And now the regulatory authorities are as well. You're going to sell a product in the EU. The EU AI Act doesn't mince words about your responsibility to protect that product, even though they have levels of criticality in there. Are you making decisions about people's lives versus other things? It doesn't mince words that it's your responsibility as a product builder, right? You're going to see those same regulations happen here in the US. Maybe not the same. And I had somebody call me, well, the election. No, there will be, the need for this type of stuff. But again, right, the liability for major companies, whoever you're selling your product to.
Right.
So you may be a startup, but you're still going to be selling your product to a major company. And they are putting those expectations on you because they need to protect their reputation, their brand, their share price. And that is actually more important to them necessarily than, maybe some side advantage, right? Data breaches. We just saw, and you're seeing these fines, right, that are really high. It's not directly an AI attack, right? But, TD Bank just got fined $3 billion for anti-money laundering violations. Now imagine if you were building an AI-based system to help fintechs, or you're a fintech and you're helping banks do anti-money laundering, right? Trust me, TD Bank and JP Morgan and everybody else is going to make sure that your system works and that it's safe and it's secure and it can't be corrupted, because $3 billion is a lot of money.
Yeah.
And you're seeing these things, right? Every day on Krebs on Security, there's a different hack. Companies are aware of it. Consumers are. Consumers should expect, right? I don't want my personal information thrown around the internet. Nobody does. And so I think the level of expectations is moving up.
Yeah, and it feels fundamental to whether you're launching an internal enterprise application, a B2B, cross enterprise application, or something consumer facing. That responsibility is there, and I think particularly for consumer face. I mean, I was listening to a talk from Dario, the founder of Anthropic.
Yeah.
It's like, look, we see right away that, every model release, there's just a certain level of like petty crime that immediately pivots to try and use the latest and just test it, and we've seen that in every case. And I think coming from a security background as well, I think we both agree the hackers are very, very smart. They're incredibly well funded, and we have to be, keenly aware that they've got, I would say, incredible upside in terms of what they do, and there's zero downside for them.
Yeah,
right? Zero risk.
The thing that I've spent my careers in software, right? Except for 2 years building airplanes, spent my career in software. But I remember in grad school, you could get a PE certificate. You were an engineer that could sign off on certain things, which meant you had a professional responsibility to do
Professional engineer certificate, not a private equity certificate.
That's right, not a private equity. And I had that, right, for just a couple of years until I figured out I didn't need it in software anymore. But all of us in the data space, and all of us in the software space, and all of us in the AI and ML space don't understand at times, or conveniently forget, that we're actually building a piece of infrastructure as important as a bridge in the future, as important as an airplane in the future. And there are certain things that we should be thinking about as developers, regardless, right? Once these systems take automatic decisions on our behalf, and that's happening. I just saw this great little startup called Resolve.ai this morning. It was announced maybe a month ago.
Called
right?
what?
Resolve.ai.
Oh yeah.
Gentic, right? Once these systems happen, and they're going to take automatic behavior on our behalf, we as engineers, we as computer scientists have a professional responsibility that needs to be fulfilled. Sorry, Grace, I went off.
No, I love that. And I wonder, when it comes to building in the security space, I definitely want to hear both of you guys like opinion on like what does the future look like, especially right now there is like a lot of like advancement in AI every single day. The models are changing and everything. So what do you predict would be like one of the biggest opportunities in the space? Same as maybe for Timur, like what are some like, partnerships opportunity for AWS, you feel like would be very beneficial for companies to, um, build like a secure company?
Well, I mean, for us, there's so much opportunity. We look at the world of AI ML right now too. It's just like at the simplest level, it's a 3-layer stack. When I was at Glean, we probably looked at it more like a 7-layer stack just because we got more refined on the data connectors. But let's say there's a compute level where you're going to have, GPU and our training and inference access. And there's whole aspects around, are you sharing GPUs? Like what does security look like at that level? And your data scientists, then you've got your model access layer. That's primarily bedrock for us. And then, probably the biggest ones are, the application layer security, right? So I think there's been some great dialogue around, we may not see as many foundation model launches probably going forward, but we're going to see now this incredible boom in applications and making things work. And so what does that look like, from a security perspective? So, partnering with us is wide open. I think from that standpoint, I think we're very selective in that. And I think, security has already gotten a pretty impressive customer base, say to the least. And so the partnership bar is high, but we're a builder ecosystem. So, I mean, what we look for are folks that have built right applications, have gotten some customer demand. And I think we get so much go-to-market request. The minimum if you're going to partner with AWS, like your minimum stage really has to be that you've got already 10 customers on us and you've got a dedicated alliances manager, right? So that takes out a lot of like seed stage companies, but there's other things we can do. I think security is kind of at the point where there's a pretty substantial go-to-market happening already.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing I would add would be, as a company, right, you need to be aware that once the AWS snowball starts, you need to be ready to keep up with them, right? Because they move fast. And you need to be in the awareness of their value to the world. And it's not just about you. And I think that that's been a great bind between us as we've gone to market, and as we continue to go to market.
Yeah.
Totally. So I wonder, based on, security's experience, what would be the best practices would you recommend for enterprise looking for implement secure AI solutions?
Well, obviously call us. No.
Okay.
I mean,
Make your takeaway.
Call me, right? Call me. But no, I think, right, a lot of the principles that we're talking about that we've put into the software, those are the same principles that your CISO is going to be looking at from OWASP, or if you have a CDAO from ethical or principled use, or your lawyers from the EUA Act. What we're really doing is embodying that in a platform to allow people to get moving much faster on that path. And so I think you need to read up a little bit. We have great education. We have a certification online that allows people to come in and take. We've had tens of thousands of people get certified on the concepts of GenAI online. And
I didn't know that. That's great.
Yeah, and it lays
great.
this out. Like, here's the things you need to worry about, and you don't need to be an engineer. Lawyers do it. All sorts of different folks do it, and not just lawyers, but lots of people do it. And I think once you're educated, then you can actually set down a program. I think here's the thing about it too. Laying down this program isn't additional costs and binding your hands. It actually accelerates your business value on the other side, right? Really good security, really good data governance, really good AI governance. Then what you get is a much higher value on the other side. Otherwise, you get stuck in this POC loop and you never get to production, or you get to production, but you don't get the impact that you expect. One of the big things about what we're doing at Securiti in partnership with AWS is allowing you to repurpose all of this knowledge across multiple systems or multiple implementations. So instead of needing, 7 teams of data scientists, each building an individual thing, they can mix and match the components and be up and running and take the learnings across all the teams.
Yeah, 100%. So I would, that's one of, if not the biggest, putting, generative AI into production, the ability to, I think, point to a framework, governance, responsible AI measurement is probably the single biggest needed, point to allow an enterprise or others to say, okay, now we can put this in the hands of our builders and see what comes and actually unleash, development that isn't coming, purely top down. And I think when we can get to that, that's the startups that can speak to that natively. And I think startups that talk security first, not necessarily as a security layer, but those that say, hey, we have an application, we're leading with SOC 2, we're leading with permissions awareness, we're leading with deep integrations on your security. Those are the ones that we see winning, and we're seeing real scale. And I think those points, I do really appreciate the security message, because I think that's what's needed, especially within enterprise. Look, is somebody going to really care about that on TikTok? No, but for the core growth, like we need that. So sorry, my
That was the TikTok people calling him. Just
yeah,
they're listening closely. Amazing. I definitely want to be mindful of time. I'm like, I want to end with a quick fire round for you guys. Okay, so number one is like, what's your favorite AI product that you can't live without?
I'm gonna let you go, Timur.
My favorite AI product that I can't live without is, oh gosh, I got.
Sorry, it's probably this call.
No, it's not. That's a horrible. Like our it's not some of our internal conferencing tools. I'll say you that. I would say that my favorite AI product that I can't live without is really just generative AI based search. So from a consumer standpoint, I do want to give a shout out to Perplexity. I do love that. And then for internal, and best internal search platform I ever use is Glean still. So I do really appreciate that ability to search across knowledge. We're getting there with some of our own AWS tools. I'll give a shout out to Q as well, but we support an open ecosystem. Our own native tools aren't always the best. We have to boost all, and just like with security, I mean, we have internal security tools, but we want to see our partners grow first and foremost.
So mine are whether it's Spotify or Apple Music, just giving me good music, because I'm stuck in Journey and REM from the 80s. So the idea that there's been music cut since the late 80s is important to me. Well, in early 90s, right?
Have you tried Suno, Jack? Are you?
I haven't, but
that is exploding too. My kids are very in the team. Like Suno is probably the TikTok of music, I would say. And
yeah,
that's what I think. So
I'm writing it down. I feel like I'm old after listening to Timur's suggestion. Okay, so number 2 question is open source or close?
Both. Yeah, for me, both. I actually think that these are going to evolve together. There's different needs, focuses, security postures. I think people from a cost standpoint, I mean, fascinating developers. I think we need to look at both. We probably see most folks really getting started with closed source, and as you get optimization or more specific use cases, but we said, do you always need a university professor, or can you sometimes get a well-trained high school teacher, in terms of what you've got? So I think we'll see continued evolution in both. And right now I'd have to point to both.
Yeah. And, I came from the open source world early with Java, early with other things like that, and then I get the value of closed. So a balance.
Last question. What do you think is the most underrated AI trend?
I think the most underrated AI trend. That's a good question. I'd say the most underrated AI trend still to this day is compute efficient applications. I mean, there's still just a rush to dump everything into a massive context window, and still the biggest request we get is just pull GPU without really looking at, can I do this with RAG? Can I do this with a more effective thing? And 90% of the time we engage with a founder, we'll find that we can implement something with probably like 40 to 70% reduction in compute usage and better production. I think that's still a story that not enough folks are telling in the ecosystem.
Yeah, and I would go with it. There's an app or there's capability still not there, which is it's great that I can get in my personal productivity. I can get, well, look, my Gmail's filling in stuff and my office and whatever, but we all have multiple digital profiles and personalities, right? Your company, your personal, whatever, and mixing all that together and then mixing all that automatically for your family isn't there. The other thing that's way underrated is the cat avatar that lawyer was, had on the day, right? I'm not a cat. I just had a problem with Zoom and I was looking it up and it says how to get rid of your cat avatar. So I think, that's still the highlight of AI to me. No judge, I'm not a cat. That's still my favorite AI application ever.
Love it.
Love it. Amazing. Well, Timur and Jack, thank you guys so much for coming on the show today. It was such a fun chat.
Awesome. Thank you for your time.
Yeah. Thanks, Grace. Appreciate you hosting us.
Thank you. Let me quickly end stream.